am Sharon Alamohodai with iTech Training, and I have a very special guest today. His name is Joe Mull. He is a respected authority on cultivating commitment in the workplace. He's also the author of two books, Cure for the Common Leader and No More Team Drama. He teaches leaders how to be better bosses and how to build stronger teams. He is the host of the Boss Better Now podcast. He has taught leadership courses at two major universities, and he is the author of the popular TEDx talk, Why Gossip Starts and Spreads at Work. Prior to launching his own practice, he managed training for one of the largest physician groups in the country, more than 9,000 employees, over 500 locations. Please welcome speaker, author, and recovering HR professional, Joe Mull.
Well, hi, Sharon. Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be with you.
Thank you for joining me. I've been very excited for us to spend some time together and for, those in my audience to get to know you, because I actually attended one of your keynote speeches at the American Society of Ophthalmic Administrators group. And I thought, what a dynamic speaker you are and what great things you have to say. And there are things that every boss would benefit from knowing and hearing. And there are things that I wish I had known and heard early in my management career. And so you were someone who I reached out to connect with so that I could bring some of your expertise to my audience and my audience could get to know your work, because I think a lot of it would really benefit them.
What a lovely couple of sentences, Sharon. Thank you so much for that. If I'm ever feeling down, I'm going to rewind this and play that back. That is really thoughtful. And I've had the privilege of keynoting ASOA's conference twice now. And, I've worked with practice managers and administrators for, over 15 years. And I have such regard for the many hats that they wear. And so that is among my favorite events to be a part of, just because the caliber of people that are there, people like yourself who really go to work every day and try to create an environment where people can thrive in, it makes this kind of work fun. So it's great to be with you.
Wow. I wanted to just start by asking you some projects that you might currently be working on, because I know that you're a very busy guy and that have your hands in a lot of pots, and you reach people and help people in a variety of different ways. You've got your podcast, you do the keynote speaking, you do coaching. Tell me some other things and projects that you're currently working on.
Oh man, you've caught me in the middle of probably one of the biggest projects I've taken on in recent years. I'm in the middle of writing my third book, and this time around I'm working with an international publisher, and so the book is scheduled for release about 1 year from now, and is scheduled for release in up to 24 different countries. And the book is going to be all about how, in this new age of work, post-pandemic, the path to finding and keeping devoted employees is by creating a more humane employee experience. And so we know that there's a lot going on in the world right now around staffing and hiring and retention, and it's hard to find and keep good people. But what we know is that what leads people to want to go to a job and stay there and try and care and give it all they've got, those things haven't really changed. What has changed is the insistence with which people are looking for that now, right? With so many people changing jobs these days, the focus for a lot of people is on quality of life and the way that their job fits into their life. And so this book really is about, what's the blueprint for that? What does it mean to create a destination workplace that people will go to and be fired up to be a part of? And so that we never have the kind of staffing challenges that so many folks out there are having right now. And so that's the big project. I am about halfway through the manuscript. I don't know how many folks listening to this have ever tried to write a book. For some people that comes easily. I am not one of those people. Is it hard for you too, Sharon? Because to me, it feels like wrestling a bear to the ground with one arm tied behind my back.
I haven't written books as big as your books are, but mine are more just kind of conversational. Yours is
Yeah.
probably on a different level than mine have been. But the book sounds really exciting. What's the title going to be? Do you know that yet?
It hasn't been locked down yet. And so I am completely embargoed from the publisher in terms of talking about what the title is. But how about this? As soon as it is allowed to be shared with public consumption, I will come back and share it with you. How about that?
I would love that. I would love that. Yes, so
but
that's
the
exciting.
concept of the book
And,
is what we
you know, it
described.
is
Yes.
amazing. It is amazing to me how workplace culture has gone through such a transformation in just 2 short years. And you're
Mm-hmm.
right that people are looking for a better work-life balance. And work culture has changed dramatically. And I think, in 50 or 100 years, we're going to look at these couple of years as being transformative for businesses and workplaces alike. I think a lot of people really enjoy working remotely. And I also think it was really one of the good things I think that came out of the pandemic was how many employers who didn't think that their employees could work remotely and they successfully did. And so there's been a huge transformation, and it's definitely come with challenges, but also with benefits. Can you talk a little bit about the challenges that you think have come about and the benefits that maybe have arisen from this big change in the workforce and employment?
Right. I think one of the challenges for some organizations is that many of their employees have gotten a glimpse of a life that they now will not give up. Just like you said, we have a lot of folks who are able to do work remotely, or maybe they were working a hybrid schedule, or maybe a reduction in hours or a part-time layoff resulted in them getting to spend more time at home with their kids. But they have seen the other side of what their life could look like if certain aspects of their job were able to accommodate it. And we see so many organizations right now at this moment who are telling their employees, okay, we want you all to come back to the office. And we have people who are saying, I used to do this soul crushingly awful 1 hour commute each way, and I am never going back to that, especially when we've proven that I can be just as effective in this remote environment. And so I personally know of at least a half a dozen CEOs who announced a mandatory return to full-time on-site staffing like they had in place prior to the pandemic. And then they saw such significant churn and turnover in their workforce from folks who said, nope, I'm not living that life anymore, that they had to backpedal and they had to reevaluate for their organizations. And so I think that is a challenge for some organizations to get their head around, but it is also an opportunity, right? Because if you can say to potential new hires, hey, we are the kind of workplace that allows you to have quality of life and to engage with us in whichever way makes the most sense for you, whether that's a hybrid schedule and part-time on-site and part-time work from home, or fully remote, whatever works for you. But I think the organizations that are trying to find that balance right now are the ones who are going to draw talent more quickly than other organizations who are refusing to consider these kinds of new setups.
I agree with you. I have actually one of my best friends. We've known each other since high school and we've remained friends all these years. She is a writer for a university and she was offered another position in the same university, but a different position that allowed her to work from home 3 days a week. And she
Yeah.
jumped at it. And
Mm-hmm.
she is so pleased with being able to not be in the rat race every morning at every rush hour and being able to work from home. And I think there's been a real imbalance in our work-life balance over the years, and there's a correction happening. And I think
Absolutely.
it's a great thing for our families. It's a great thing for us. And I love it. And one of the things when I was a practice administrator, I was in that 8 to 5, but really wasn't 8 to 5. It's more like
Right.
6 to 6 to 6 kind of
6 to
rat
after
race.
dinner. Yeah.
Yes, and now I have a home office, and it's just makes such a difference in your life. And so I think that's definitely a great thing that's happened from this.
I'm going to speak to that just for a second because I think that's a really important broader point for people to understand, and it's something that, as I'm doing a lot of a conference speaking now, that I'm focusing on, which is to help people understand that the unprecedented levels of burnout that we're seeing in the workplace right now, and all the staffing challenges that we're seeing right now, were not caused by COVID. And people will hear that statement and think that it's absurd. But we were at an all-time high in burnout in the workforce prior to COVID. And we were working more hours per week as a workforce than any other industrialized nation on earth prior to the workforce. So COVID didn't cause this. COVID was just this big, heavy event that landed on a workforce that was already exhausted and broke it. And so when we talk about post-pandemic and helping people recover from burnout and helping organizations solve staffing challenges, it's not about fixing people as it relates to the pandemic. It's about fixing work. It's about fixing how our jobs fit into our lives, because that's the reckoning that's taking place right now. We have to be able to respond to the changing needs and values of a changed workforce, and that means changing work.
And I think that that's something that's good. That's good that has come out of the pandemic. It was a catalyst for change on many levels, and not all bad.
Right. And the pandemic, the pandemic didn't cause this, but it made everybody braver. Right. If you think about changing jobs prior to COVID, that was a big life decision. And we would be very deliberate about that. You would talk to people in your network and you would think about, is this the right move in the right time in the right situation? And then COVID arrived and it injected all of this uncertainty and instability into the job market. And it stayed like that for almost 2 years. And so we have no risk aversion left in terms of the job market. And when you add that to how exhausted everybody is, now it is no big deal to consider a job change. And because there are so many opportunities available, and because those numbers are going to continue to go up, what we're experiencing right now around staffing isn't a blip. And this pursuit of better quality of life and how our job fits into our lives, it's not a fad. This is the new normal now. And the sooner that organizations get clear about that and cater to that, the sooner they will become the organization that people go to instead of the organization that people leave from.
Yeah, it's a market correction. It's a market correction. It's something I think that has been needed, but no one knew how we could do it or how it would happen or if it could even happen. And the pandemic was good to us in that way.
Indeed.
So I know, Joe, that when you go into organizations, you're helping leaders go from being ineffective to effective. And sometimes that's a big leap. Can you tell me, like, how did they get there? Like, tell me about a time that you worked with a leader in whatever industry and how you helped them get from being an ineffective leader to being an ultra effective leader.
Yeah. Most of the organizations I work with, and I think this will speak to your heart a little bit, Sharon, given the nature of your work and the function of iTech training, is that in so many places, there's very little development and support for managers, for people whose primary function is to lead people. And so moving people from being ineffective as a manager to being more effective, first and foremost, it starts with time. Sometimes we think it has to be a big investment of cost, but that's not necessarily the case. Even just setting aside the time to talk about, what does it mean to be an effective leader? What does it mean to be a great boss? What are the characteristics of a great boss? What are the kinds of experiences that people need to have here to feel supported, to feel like they belong, to feel like their work matters? And then how do we make sure that we create those conditions? And so I tell people all the time, you don't necessarily need me to train your leaders how to be better bosses. I can do that. I can help with that. But first and foremost, how are you setting aside time? So Gallup has done a lot of research around employee engagement and leadership and the role that managers play. And one of the findings that they have uncovered in recent years is that there is a correlation between high degrees of employee engagement on a team and the manager of that team belonging to a manager peer group. And so what this means is if I'm the manager and I have a peer group of other managers that I can talk to regularly about my people management challenges, about leading teams, about the things I'm struggling with, that actually translates into me being a better supervisor, which then translates into creating more engagement on my teams. And so the path from ineffective to effective really is about the ongoing touch points we create to help people do that work.
That really resonates with me, Joe. When I was promoted to management, I realized it is lonely at the top. You have no peers usually. You have subordinates and you have superiors, and you have to keep both happy. And there's no one really keeping you happy. And I actually formed an ophthalmic administrators group, a closed group on Facebook. There's no doctors, there's no lay staff in it. And on the title of it, or the cover photo, it says, ophthalmic practice administrators, you are not alone. Because a lot of times when I was a practice administrator, I did feel alone. And I agree, having a network of other administrators that you can commiserate with, that you can collaborate with, bounce ideas off of is key. And the ASOA has a wonderful iMail. It's called iMail. It's a listserv. I also have a newsletter on LinkedIn. It's called Ophthalmic Managers Corner. And I try and bring articles and interviews and things to my people in my audience that will benefit them in that way, to help them be better leaders, be better managers, or just bringing something of value to them on a regular basis. But I personally experienced exactly what you just talked about.
And when you didn't have it in place for you, you went out and sought it out or created it for yourself. And your point of not being limited just to your internal employer environment is really well said. The number of leaders who get involved in an association like ASOA, or they connect with peer groups online and use social media for good in that way, they actually get all of the same benefits. And so it's a point really well taken.
Yes. So, Joe, what would you say inspires you? You know, we all have something at our core, and sometimes it's more than one thing. What would you say really, really inspires you?
Well, around here, when we talk about what we do for a living, we say that we're on a mission to fill workplaces with better bosses. And, you know, what inspires me about that is just think about the massive difference we can make at a societal level in people's lives if we can make work for them. You know, how many people do we know that go to work and that are miserable, or they're just going through the motions? They're just punching a clock. I feel so blessed, Sharon, because I wake up every day and I can't wait to go to work. You know, I fell in love with this work years ago. And if you've ever had the experience of loving a job, it's a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing for all the obvious reasons, but it's a curse because you'll never accept anything less after you have that experience, right? And so we have so many people who go to work every day and don't get that experience. And not only does their professional life suffer or experience a negative consequence as a result, but that trickles down into their home life. It trickles down to their family. If we can make work for people, and the conduit for that is better bosses, then we can have a pretty significant impact on society at large. We know that 75% of people who quit a job indicate that their boss is part or all of the reason why. So people don't quit their jobs, they quit their bosses. And we know that if you are lucky enough to have the experience of being in a job that you love, that fits with your talents, that fits into your life in the right way, whether or not you are experiencing those conditions almost always comes down to whether or not your supervisor is creating them for you and allowing you to thrive in that way. And so that's what inspires me, the potential to do good on a massive level, because we're trying to build better bosses.
And if you could pin down 3 to 5 things that make a better boss, what would those be?
Okay, well, I'm going to give you a preview then of because we were talking about the book. And so, one of the big pieces in this book about creating an environment and a more humane employee experience, there are three characteristics of bosses who do just that. So, I'll tell you what they are. The first is a boss who focuses on trust. So, we know trust is the magic dust of leadership. And we know that when you have a boss who grants trust and earns trust, it has a profound impact on engagement. If you have a boss who doesn't grant trust, you probably have a micromanager. And people don't feel like they have the freedom and the autonomy to do their work, and that has a negative impact on their psychological commitment. And likewise, if you don't have a boss who earns trust back from people, then their people perceive them as underhanded or incompetent, or for whatever reason that they don't buy into that person as the leader. And obviously that has a cost as well. So the first ingredient is trust. Do they grant trust and earn trust? The second ingredient is coaching. And so there is a boatload of social science research that tells us that when leaders lead with a coaching mindset, it correlates to higher levels of engagement in the workplace. A coaching mindset is embracing curiosity before judgment. So if I have a member of my team who shows up in a way that is either out of line or out of character, my first response isn't judgment. My first response is curiosity. It's to say, hey, what's that about? Let me understand. Let me sit down with this person and using curiosity, try to find out, hey, what's going on? Is this just a good person having a bad day? Let me not snap to a judgment about their character first. A coaching mindset also means that we embrace a responsibility to develop that person. And so when somebody comes to us with questions, we're not just giving them the answers. We're asking them, hey, what options do you see? Based on what you know and what we talked about at the huddle this morning, what do you think is the next best step in terms of solving this problem? That's a coaching mindset. And we know there's a correlation between engagement and being a coach. So that's the second one. The third is advocate. And so if you think about what an advocate does, an advocate is somebody who acts in the best interests of somebody else. So when my boss is an advocate for me, it means that they care about me as a person, actually over the position. They care more about me as a person and my life than they do just the role that I'm in and that I fill for the organization. An advocate is also someone who gets what you need in order to be at your best. So a boss who provides the equipment and materials that somebody needs to do their job well is an advocate. A boss who puts themselves between some of the crap that rolls downhill sometimes in the workplace and the employees that are standing behind them is a great boss. And so those are my three key dimensions of being a great boss, Sharon. There's many, 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 many things that we have to do to be a great boss, but these three are perhaps the most important, that are the least attended to: trust, coach, advocate.
Those are some pearls right there, Joe. Those are big pearls. I'm kind of inspired. I'm actually teaching a course at this year's ASOA meeting in Washington, D.C. later this month. And I'm teaching several courses, but one of them is called A Tale of Three Practices: the good, the bad, and the ugly. And how to take your practice from ordinary to extraordinary. And you're hitting on a lot of the things that I put in my course. So all of that rings true. And I feel very passionate about the things you just talked about. And I think the world would be a better place if we had bosses like that. And you're right, you are changing the world one boss at a time. And changing one boss can change multitudes of people's lives, because they may have multitudes of people that they touch in their organization who benefit from them being a better boss.
Right.
So
and people vote
terrific.
with their feet, and that's what's happening in the workplace right now.
That's
And
right.
never before have we had so many people raise their hand and say, I am leaving because I want to be treated better. And that translates in a lot of ways. Sometimes it translates into money, and sometimes it translates into time, and sometimes it translates into workload, but it often translates into the quality of the interactions that I have with my boss. And so I think organizations now more than ever before are paying attention to the kinds of development and support that they provide for managers so that they can show up as better bosses.
Now, Joe, I know that you have a podcast,
Mhm.
and your podcast is Boss Better Now.
That's right. Boss Better Now. Yep.
Yeah. Do you have some other things on your, any other music or podcasts on your playlist that you like to play regularly?
Oh, great question. I'm a huge fan of Adam Grant's Work Life podcast. Adam Grant is an organizational development professor at the Wharton College and just always does these incredibly rich, thoughtful, insightful episodes about an issue related to behavior in the workplace. And so anytime a new episode of that comes out, I'm definitely game. I listen to a lot of NPR podcasts, and I try to keep my finger on the pulse of what's happening around work and hiring and employee engagement and leadership, because all of these things contribute in one way to another to the work that I do around commitment at work.
How about music? What's on your music playlist?
That's on my music playlist. So my bachelor's degree is in music. I don't know if you knew that.
No, I
My
didn't.
my 4-year degree is in voice, and so I'm a song and dance man at heart, Sharon. That's why I like keynote speaking, because I still get to be on a stage.
Yes.
But I listen to a little bit of everything. I'll bounce from the Hamilton soundtrack to the 80s hair metal station on my satellite radio to hip hop. I like all of it. Probably the only thing I don't listen to a lot is country, but most everything else shows up there in one way or another.
Well, it's nice to have some variety in your life, right? And different
Absolutely.
music for different moods.
For sure.
Well, Joe, thank you so much for spending the time chatting with me. I know I really enjoyed learning more about what you do and what you bring to the table for so many leaders in various different industries. And I feel very blessed that I got to meet you last summer at the ASOA meeting. And I hope that we can continue to stay in touch and bring value to one another. And thank you again for your time. And Joe, how can people get in touch with you if they want to?
Oh, thank you, Sharon. And the pleasure was absolutely mine. Thank you for such an easy and interesting conversation. The simplest way to connect is to go to bossbetternow.com. There you can subscribe to the podcast. You can sign up for our twice a month Boss Better emails, and you can get to our site where if people are interested in training or keynotes for programs and conferences, all of it is behind that front door, bossbetternow.com.
I have to give you a genuine personal plug. You are one of the most dynamic speakers I have ever had the pleasure of listening to. I actually was part of Toastmasters for a few years to become a better speaker myself. And when I heard you give your keynote speech, I said, that's the kind of speaker I aspire to be. And I think if anyone needs a keynote speaker, you would be the one to go to. And I can wholeheartedly say that from being in your audience and not even knowing you. That was what really inspired me to reach out to you and make contact. So is that one of the most fun things you get to do?
What a lovely thing to say, Sharon. Thank you. Yes, it is. It is my favorite part of this work. If you want to bring in a professional speaker because you're having a conference and you want to serve that audience well, or you're having an internal employee event or a leadership meeting, you want it to be not just a learning event, you want it to be an experience for the audience. And so I focus a lot on mixing comedy with some rich social science research and some clear takeaways. And so the challenge of making that all work together is always really interesting to me. It's almost like creating a one-man show. Like if you were doing a one-person, one-act play that mixes all of those things together. And the privilege of being in front of an audience and figuring out how to make them laugh, but also give them something with a lot of utility that they can use immediately. It's a thrill every time. And so thank you so much for those.
Well, you
words.
definitely
really
bring
something.
it. You bring it. So if somebody wanted to get in touch with you for keynote speaking, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Okay. Thank you. JoeMull.com, JoeMull.com is the main site. Or if you go to bossbetternow.com, you will see a link for the speaking page up there as well. So either way will get you there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for spending time with me. And it's been a pleasure getting to know you better and bringing a lot of value to those who are in my audience. And thank you again. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Sharon, so much for having me. The pleasure was mine. Thanks again.